The hour has just clicked over from 9 p.m. to 10 p.m., and now that we're past the hour of 10 p.m., I hope you know what that means. It is time for the Hourz O Power, the heavy metal and hardcore specialty show here at Impact 89 FM. I am your very cool and very normal host, DJ Brick, and I will be your guide through the peaks and valleys of scary music for the next 4 hours. That's right, 4 hours. A little too long if you ask some people, not long enough if you ask me.
My top 5 is kind of interesting because I have one album that is like the certified number 1, that is like my all-timer. And then I have the other 4 that are just kind of up there, like unranked. There's not a distinct order except for number 1. I think they're all incredible. So we can start with number 1, which is Big Kiss Goodnight by Trapped Under Ice, which is just flat out perfect. I mean, there's like not a wasted second on that album. I think it's a really interesting sort of culmination of the history of like hardcore music, and like it is really kind of able to synthesize that, and also like being distinct and doing the TUI thing, which is, you know, having like having interesting accents that are so simple but somehow like no band has ever done before. Justice Tripp's lyrics, of which there are 1 billion, every single verse. There's so many words, and somehow you know all of them all the time. It's crazy. And it's just, in spite of everything, like, it's catchy. Like, it's in your face, it's aggressive, but it's still got a moment where you can be like still stuff you can, like, hum along to and, like, just kind of move to. It's very, I mean, and obviously it's, you know, if anyone here knows Trapped Under Ice, they've still got the violent pit parts, and I think it's just like the hardcore album of the 21st century, if not like ever. So I didn't really get into Trapped Under Ice until a few years ago. So I had been into hardcore for a bit, and then I sort of came across Trapped Under Ice, and it just destroyed my world, completely realigned how I look at life. It permanently altered my brain chemistry. So I got into hardcore through sort of like metalcore and deathcore, because in middle school I was listening to a lot of that stuff. And it was just a really bad era for deathcore. None of it was good, and I was wondering, I was like, man, I wonder if there's good music out there. I'm listening to this stuff, and it's like, okay. And then my friend sent me this band called Knocked Loose, their album Laugh Tracks, which is, they're of course the biggest band in the world now. But that's what I was really into, is the more like metallic hardcore type of stuff. You know, your panic chords, your crazy like super metalcore, deathcore influenced. And that was kind of my jam for the longest time. And then as I started to get into more like kind of classic hardcore bands and quote unquote doing my homework, you know, I became obsessed with Terror, Madball, Marauder, all like the classic heavy hitters, Hatebreed, obviously. And I came across Trapped Under Ice because I listened to a podcast and someone was mentioning something about like, oh, like, and this band, like I toured with this guy and this band was like crazy, they're on top of the world. And I was like, I've seen this album cover, I should check it out. And I listened to it, and it just like floored me. It was unbelievable. And I mean, if you've seen the album cover to Big Kiss Goodnight, it's pretty striking. It's like big cross on top of a pile of skulls and like this very cool sort of almost like American traditional like tattoo, like kind of poppy style. It's very, very incredible to just kind of gaze at. It's pretty, I said striking, it's striking. And I think on physical releases it's different, but on streaming it's just the album cover. There is no name, no title on it's just the image. And I really like that. I like when a band does that, and it's just like, cool, here's the art, here's the music, that's it, listen to it. It's very flatly just there. So, next one that comes to mind is a step in a different direction, is probably Slipknot's self-titled album. And there are probably people going, well, he should have said Iowa. Iowa's got all like the heavy songs. Or he should have said Volume 3, because Volume 3 has like the catchy hits, but I mean, I think Volume 1, the self-titled, has this kind of like raw, itchy, angry, like furious quality that none of the others do. It's very, I don't want to say stripped down, because I mean Slipknot has 9 members, there's a lot going on. But it's very much a little less, I'm gonna say less refined, and I do not mean that in a negative way at all. It feels very much like a first album. Like there's that saying, you have your entire life to make your first album, and then you have 2 years to make your second album. It's like some joke I heard forever ago, but it really has that first album quality. Like these guys have been together writing and creating for so long. It's like, and now we're gonna make Volume 1, Slipknot Volume 1, self-titled, and it's just so in your face. It's also got some everyone talks about like breakdowns, and breakdowns mean kind of a different thing in hardcore, because it's like, sure, you can have a breakdown, but then it's, it's not necessarily a mosh part, because sometimes a breakdown's blah, 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 blah. Slipknot does both. There's just a straight up like metal band, which is awesome, that they also have these insane sort of like fight riff breakdowns, and they're able to straddle like an interesting gap in music. Because it's super nu metal, but it's not, it's not Mudvayne, Limp Bizkit. It still has like such an edge, and it kind of takes the goofiness away. Because people will talk about nu metal and they'll kind of like scoff at it, but there's so much like rage in Slipknot's self-titled. I think it kind of stands alone because it removes sort of the goofy rap rock elements, even though the rap rock tracks on the self-titled are so sick. I definitely do subscribe to the belief that there is an old and new Slipknot, and I think you'd be pretty hard-pressed to disagree with that. Even if you like both eras, there's such a significant sonic change. I wouldn't necessarily call them sellouts. I don't think that's true at all. I mean, they're still making aggressive, interesting music. It is just aggressive, interesting music that... I said interesting, I'm talking about other people. I don't find their new releases all that interesting or entertaining. They've kind of, IMO, they've kind of lost the sauce. Doesn't necessarily mean like they're bad musicians or anything. It's just the qualities that I liked about those first few albums just aren't really as prominent, or even non-existent at this point. But I don't really think I can knock them for it. They're obviously very successful. Their checkbooks are not hurting because of their decision to go in a different creative direction. But I don't know. I think there is sort of like an odd beauty to it of there being sort of like an old band and a new band. Because like sure, they're playing like huge stadiums now, and they're doing this crazy like productions, a bunch of like fire going up all the time. And it's a huge, it's like a stage production. But it is fun to just think about that compressed into a tiny 150 person club room, and them playing early on. And I think there's a specialness to that, because when I go to concerts, this is kind of my philosophy on it. I tend to not take that many videos. I try to be a sort of in the moment person and kind of cherish it, because once the moment is gone, it's gone forever. And so that without a video, there's kind of a specialness to that moment. And I think it's fun that Slipknot is now probably permanently playing stadiums, and they're never going to be playing these small, probably really violent club shows again. And I say violent is a good thing. Sometimes people will hear that and think, that's terrible, but it's in the context of this aggressive music, it's a pretty cool thing. It's a good thing. Obviously, I'm not going to get into the whole violence at shows conversation. Whatever. It's cool. The shows used to be old, tiny and special and this, and now that you can't go back to that, I think it's nice that there is sort of these two parts of them. They can be this big, successful stadium rock band and also still have that little bit of edge from their, angry, angsty club days. Oh, geez. Well, let's go to Joyce Manor's self-titled. Let's stick with self-titled. Boom, twist. Now it's not scary, angry music. It's weird, indie, alt-rock, emo, with strange abstract lyrics. I'm not totally sure how this became such an important album for me. I had a friend who would listen to Joyce Manor, and he was like, "Oh, Nick, you like weird indie rock type stuff. You had, your modern baseball phase and all that stuff." And I was like, "Sure, give me that." And Joyce Manor was not that at all. They have a lot of a lot of edge. Their lyrics can get kind of strangely violent and abstract, but at the same time, they're not getting screamed at you, maybe yelled. There's definitely a harshness to Guy and Joyce Manor's voice, but it's not indecipherable. It's not it's not Slipknot self-titled. It's not Big Kiss Goodnight Trapped Under Ice. It's like a very like human aggression, I would say. There's it just feels very sincere, and it's just in my opinion like a heartbreaking album. It gets very sad, and it gets very sad in a way that is not like weepy, but you listen to it, and I think they are sort of an example of a middle school band, because this album's from 2013, and it's sort of maintained its status, and I love it. It rocks. It gets just weird enough to where like normal people can listen to it and be like, okay, I get it, but it also gets just weird enough to keep me interested. There is an odd connection between your shoegaze indie type stuff and hardcore. I think in a big way, because a lot of people in the sort of more prominent shoegazy indie rock bands right now are also in hardcore bands, and I think people who are primarily into the sort of indie shoegaze scene don't know that, and it's just kind of funny to see them sort of cross-pollinate at shows. For example, last night I saw Fleshwater, and I went with two people to the concert who were there pretty much primarily to see Fleshwater, and Fleshwater is a band full of people who are in other hardcore bands, and so there's a bunch of hardcore kids, watching Fleshwater, like, doing their thing, and there's a bunch of just, regular people into regular music and not scary music, just jumping up and down, hanging out. And I think of other bands like Modern Color, Military Gun, all full of people in other hardcore bands. I mean, Military Gun, their songwriter and vocalist, he's a drummer and screamer in like a power violence band called Regional Justice Center. There's just a bunch of interesting like cross connections, and I just think it's funny that these sort of worlds can collide when they're very, very separate. Album number 4 is going to be another softie. This is Life in Your Glass World by Citizen, which is the most recent album on this list. Came out in 2021, and I love Citizen. The whole band, their whole trajectory, album 1 to their most recent album, Calling the Dogs. It's a band that you're able to sort of track their changes through the albums. You hear Youth, and then you hear Everyone Goes to Heaven, and you're like, okay, I can understand how we got to there from there. And Youth is like, really kind of like dour, emo, like down-tempo, pretty sad. Everyone Goes to Heaven is kind of the same thing, and then it gets like dark and weirdly atmospheric. As You Please, their next album, 27, starts to play around with a little more like melodic type stuff and playing with synths and like having a little chorus say stuff in the song in the middle of it all. And then you get to Life in Your Glass World, and it's kind of just like almost a straight up like alt rock, like pop album. It's super catchy. It's really it's very lively. There's a lot of up-tempo songs. It's got a bunch of energy, but then it also still kind of like gets down and gets a little weird later in the track list. Like there's a Fight Beat, which is a really strange little song where it's just this very repetitive drum beat. There's no real melody to it. Kind of like goes and goes for like 2 minutes and stops. It's just this like, it feels like the middle of a song and someone cut off like the tip and tail of it. And and I think it's great. It's fascinating that something like that still exists on this really big like catchy sing-along album. And it's also, the lyrical content is also pretty sad, which is I suppose I listen to sad music. I enjoy it, and that contrasting with the really catchy instrumentals I think it's something a lot of bands strive for and very few achieve well, and I think Citizen does it exceptionally well. Not much to say about this album other than it's just flat out perfect. It's a Master Killer by Marauder. It is, I think, undoubtedly the best hardcore album of all time. As much as I love Big Kiss Goodnight, I don't think Big Kiss Goodnight... I said Big Kiss Goodnight was the best album of all time, and there's this. I think that can be true for both albums, because I don't think they exist without each other. I don't think Big Kiss Goodnight happens unless Master Killer happens. And Master Killer has laid the groundwork for so many bands. I mean, if you listen to Master Killer and then you listen to The Gods Hate self-titled, the influence is bleeding out of the seams on the God's Hate self-titled. Marauder is one of the most, and it's interesting because the album came out in '95, and they've only really like just started in the last like 5-10 years or so to really get their flowers and really be appreciated as like one of the bands of the '90s, because in the '90s there were so many. You've got your Madball, you've got your Cold as Life, you've got your big scary bands. The Boston scene is crazy, like the '90s straight edge bands in Boston. It's a whole thing. And then Marauder, New York, it feels like they didn't slip under the rug, but they didn't have that sort of huge prominence that they do now, because there's not a single negative word to be said about Master Killer. It's like I just look at that album and I think, yeah, like they did it. Like that's it. In the respect of running a radio show and being able to play what I want to on air, and I play like a hardcore and metal show, so I obviously play a lot of hardcore. In this way, I take sort of the stance of the reverse gatekeeper, where I'm not interested in being like, oh, I don't want to get this person into this band I really like, because then they're a dork and they like the same band I like. No, I want everyone to listen to everything and love everything. So I'm on my show, I'm playing Marauder, I'm playing Trapped Under Ice, I'm playing the stuff that I think is like, you know, true and like the real like cool stuff. I'm not trying to essentially play what I think people want to hear as much as it's like, oh, he's going to play some Turnstile, he's going to play some Knocked Loose and some Scowl and stuff like that. I do want it to be like, I want it to be open to people, where it's like, listen, it's like, here are sort of like the tracks and the albums, kind of like the sort of, you know, the doing your homework type part of it, where it's like, yeah, like if you want to get into hardcore, that's awesome, please do. Here's what it's about, and here's like the stuff that laid the groundwork. Here is, you know, Master Killer. Here is, you know, Madball, Set It Off. Here's that stuff. I want it to be like, I want to be open, and I want people to listen and to like it. I do agree, we are in like a hardcore renaissance. Hardcore shows are incredible now. There's so many different types of people and so many people just getting into it for the first time. I'm happy that it's become sort of big. It's not necessarily mainstream, nor do I think it ever will be, and frankly, nor do I think it should be. But, you know, people will show up to shows and then they will, you know, have very strong opinions about like, you like moshed on me, or like you're moshing too violently, or stuff like that. And I believe that new people should be, you know, regularly brought into the scene, and like we should try to like to be open to like say like, yeah, like this is a space for, like you know, come and see what we're about. It's like, please, like check us out. But also, I don't believe that hardcore should necessarily, I don't think it should change for the new people. And I don't mean that to be in as like, I don't want any new people, because that's how this scene sustains itself. But I think that if we get too many people in here who don't necessarily, this is going to start to sound a little gatekeepy, but it's like people who like haven't, you know, done their homework, like listened to the old bands and really started to appreciate the culture instead of just, you know, some dope albums that came out a few years ago. It's like, it's because it really is like, it's a culture, it's a community. It's respectfully, it's like, we're not going to change for you. Like, this has been happening for so long. It's like, just now, like, because you showed up, it's like, no, like, it's like we're good. Like, if it's not for you, that's okay. Like, a thing I've heard and I've said myself is that hardcore is like for anyone, but not everyone. So it's not going to be this mass appeal thing where everyone can get into it, because it never has been that, and I don't think it ever will be that, and I don't think it should. I think the interesting part of it, what makes it so special, is that it is small, and that it is, you know, kind of insular and very resilient. You know, don't pretend to, like, you know, be a lifer and be about it, like, if you're not. It's a, I don't want to make this sound like it's a religion or anything, but like it's a slightly more serious thing that I think people understand. Like, it is a community, and it is like a group of friends and like a family to an extent.